Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Automate Live. I'm really excited to be at the desk here now with a bunch of folks that are experts in robotics standards. Joining me from the Association for Advancing Automation are my two colleagues. Starting on the far side of the desk is Maren Roush. Maren, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And then we have, of course, Carole Franklin. Carole, so excited to have you here.
Thanks, Jana. It was a great opportunity.
And then, of course, we've got Bill Edwards, and we've got a couple titles for Bill. He is the vice chair of the R1506 committee, and you are the senior manager of collaborative robots at Yaskawa Motoman. So let's dive in. Let's talk about some standards. Let's just start really basic. Carole, why are standards so important in this industry and to A3?
Yeah, so standards are very important because they help reduce trade barriers, both across a large country like the U.S., but also internationally. So depending on which type of standard you're talking about, but regardless, the point is to reduce trade barriers and make it easier for products that comply with the given standard to find a market. And so some of the examples that we like to use are, outside of our industry, something like USB drives. We used to pass those around at our ISO standards, and people from all over the world, different countries, be able to use that same thing. And that's because there's ISO standards about USB drives. Well, likewise, in our industry, we have ANSI and ISO standards for robotics. And that helps the entire ecosystem of robotics users, manufacturers, and everybody else to have products that will work well together. The great thing about standards from my point of view is that it's a voluntary association of interested parties who are working together to achieve a certain goal, and voluntarily. So nobody's forcing them to do it, they just see the value of it economically.
Absolutely. And that's, of course, from, our perspective as A3, the Association for Advancing Automation. Carole, you're very instrumental, along with the rest of the team, are actually creating these standards. As you are, Bill, on the committee. Can you speak to that a little bit from the industry point of view? Why are standards so important?
I think technology is moving at such a rapid pace. We view these standards as foundational documents, and I really think that it's that foundation is what we're going to see a lot of people grow and learn on in the future.
1,000%. Let's talk a little bit more about A3, since we are here at Automate. Why is A3 been seen as a leader in creating these standards?
Yeah, so in our standards efforts, as I said, we work mainly in the ANSI and ISO frameworks, and actually 40-some years ago, we initially began working on the first standard for industrial robot safety, R1506. And I believe that effort started in 1982. And so we've continually managed the committee that runs that standard since 1982. And the reason we did that, the reason we undertook that mission was because we realized as an industry that keeping people safe around robots when they're there to work, the people are there to work, for them to have that opportunity, they shouldn't have to subject themselves to unsafe conditions. And so keeping people safe around robots was going to be a real ticket of entry for the success of our industry. And so that's why we, took it upon ourselves, like I said, voluntarily registered as a standards developing organization with ANSI and began working on R1506. And so we've kept that standard updated over the years. And actually, I'm going to hand it over to Maren for a moment, because in the early 2000s, we took the R1506 of 99 and took it to ISO. And so the virtue of taking it to ISO, I'm going to let Maren speak to that.
Tell us, Maren.
Okay. So moving R1506, which was the industrial robot safety standard, into an international forum was achieved by putting it through the ISO process, which is the International Organization for Standardization. And we have a number of different countries that participate in ISO, pretty much all of Europe, Japan, Brazil, I'm trying to think Korea, there's more than that. So by pulling that knowledge that's in that standard into the ISO standard, we got these international viewpoints to help make it even better. So, every country has a slightly different way of working, and to have them agree to reach consensus on what the requirements should be for industrial robots means that we have a more robust document, and it's protecting people wherever the standard is used. And then also having this sense of harmonization from the different countries means that they're not battling over, oh, our country's standard is better than your country's standard. We're all using ISO, and it may be called something different within our own countries because we have things that are called national standards where we adopt ISO standard as in America, an American national standard. But the requirements are the same, and it really helps manufacturers of technology streamline their sales and distribution processes where they don't have to make different models to meet different standards. They can meet one line of requirements and get their products into the market faster and have better products as well.
Yeah, awesome. Well, and it is a challenging process. I mean, we're talking, it's very detailed. It takes a long time. It's a lot of collaboration across industries and different regulatory agencies and countries. So what are some of those challenges in creating these standards? Carole, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. So as Maren mentioned, when we're seeking consensus, so again, development of these standards is voluntary and also compliance with the standards is voluntary. And the only reason anyone would comply with a voluntary standard is because they think it meets their needs. And so that has to be developed through a process of consensus. We have to get broad agreement. We have to keep talking about a particular topic until we get broad agreement amongst all the people in the room. But that's what makes the standard so valuable, too. That's what makes it take a long time, but it's also what makes it so valuable. But, again, it's something that a manufacturer can take, and as Maren mentioned, you can use it with minimal changes around the world. So.
Oh, absolutely. And from my vantage point, I think that's what I see as the biggest challenge is just the time it takes from the time we recognize the need. We go through the consensus process, which is the expression goes, iron sharpens iron. So we have a lot of learned experts around the table. We all have opinions, and everything is valid, and we discuss those. And over time, we hone that, and hopefully what we produce is a product that is really meets the industry's needs. And unfortunately, that does take a little bit amount of time to do it, but we're all richer for the experience, for
Absolutely.
sure. So
It's worth that extra effort.
Absolutely.
All of the international travel that you all do and get everybody on the same page. Bill, how do you see the role of standards evolving in the future?
Well, I was just having an interesting conversation with some of the folks from A3 this morning, and Carole and I were talking, and I said, I really see, as I mentioned earlier, that standards are foundational documents, and as we see a lot of the workforce beginning to leave and retire, we have this attrition. This has created a really large learning gap in the workforce. You know, a lot of my generation, we came up as robotics were becoming, popular, so a lot of what we learned was tribal knowledge. Well, we've been pouring over the years, a lot of what we've learned, a lot of what we've brought into the industry, a lot of things that we've done have found their way now into the standards. So these standards are now foundational documents that the next generation, I think, can really use and grow from. And basically, they don't have to learn everything we did. It's in the standard.
Right. You did, all the hard work is done.
I
The
wouldn't say
foundation
that.
is there.
They learned it the
I
hard
wouldn't
way.
say that. We've given them enough at least to give them a good start, I think.
The harder work now begins. Okay, so how can individuals and companies in the industry actively contribute and benefit from the standards?
So having come from industry and having participated, and now I find myself as vice chair of the committee, and that's an honor, really. When you deal with the kind of people that I've worked with over the years, I would say get involved. Really, I think that's the key. The real value is having a chance to sit down and learn the why behind why something's in a standard and having those conversations, because I think that's really where the learning takes place. It isn't so much as what's written on the page, it's understanding why it's on the page to begin with. And for me, I find that of immense benefit as I'm trying to explain to people why things are what they are and what they should do moving forward. So the real benefit to an employer and even to an employee is that knowledge, what we bring to the table, and then what we bring back to our company and our customers.
Absolutely. I think that makes so much sense, just not even in the standards world, just generally, even if I'm trying to get a point across to somebody, explaining that why and kind of seeing the big picture, where are we trying to get to, that is so helpful. So Carole, do you have anything that you would add to that? How can folks get involved? Can they just email you?
Yeah, absolutely. So honestly, in A3's role is we are the administrator and coordinator of these standards. The actual work is done by the experts. So, we can't actually produce a standard unless companies permit and support their employees to come to the meetings, spend time in the meetings, and travel, And so we need companies to recognize the value of the task we're asking people to do, and to sort of generously donate their people's expertise, because actually it's going to benefit you in the long run. And so people like Bill, who's been involved since forever, and he's just been a tremendous, vital participant in our discussions. If you want to get involved as an ANSI accredited standards developing organization, we actually have to follow ANSI's rules in how we manage our committees. And ANSI's rules are meant to ensure fairness and transparency and access to basically anyone who is is an interested party in the work. So if you think you have a compelling interest in this work, which is the case if you're, a robot manufacturer, a supplier to the robotics industry, a robot user, someone who researches robotics, and if you think you're an interested party in that, then you have a right to come to the table. And how you do that for our particular committees is you email one of us, so Maren or me, and we will direct you to our online application form, or you can actually find it on automate.org under the standards tab, and just fill out that form, and then one of us will get back to you and we'll invite you to our next meeting.
Awesome. Yeah, there's so much great information about the standards on automate.org, including the standards themselves. You can actually purchase them. And I also wanted to mention, just for folks out there, you can also come to the International Robot Safety Conference in the fall.
That's a big one.
I'm sure you have been all deeply involved in making that event such a success every year. Do you want to just say a quick word about why that's a great event for people to come to in the fall?
Yeah. I spoke at last year's IRSC, and I had an absolute blast. It was great to actually network. I think that's part of it, is we have a chance to sit down and talk to a lot of the industry experts that are there and ask them any questions that you may have. And as I said during the presentation we're all colleagues at these events. The competition, sure, we compete outside of those events, but when we're in these events and we're in these meetings, we're colleagues, and we're there to learn and assist each other, and that's really what it's all about, and I think that's what makes these things so valuable.
I will say, just coming from the outside and seeing that event for the first time, it is so collaborative, so communal, and it really does paint the picture. Everyone is deeply passionate about keeping humans safe while they're working with these machines.
And we do try to keep it new, so that a lot of people that come to IRSC are newer to the safety environment, and so they're learning some of that foundational information at the conference. But then we do every year try to bring in new and exciting speakers for those people who have attended IRSC in the past. And with time, it's always been the International Robot Safety Conference, but we're getting heavier on the international side of things and trying to represent that group of constituents as well.
That's right. It's going to be great. All right. Well, this has been lovely. Thank you all so much for coming on Automate Live today and talking about standards and why you're so passionate and why it's so important in this industry. I really appreciate it.
We appreciate it as well. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks.
That's it. We'll be back here later with more today.